The sound of expensive heels clicking against marble floors echoed through the grand southern mansion. Each step was deliberate. Each step was meant to intimidate. Emma stood frozen in the doorway, her second-hand dress suddenly feeling like a costume in the wrong play. The scent of magnolias drifted through the open windows, but even that sweet fragrance couldn't mask the bitterness that was about to unfold. What happened next would shatter everything Emma thought she knew about family, dignity, and her own worth. Welcome back. Tell me from which city you are watching me and what time it is there. Now listen to this story. Emma clutched her purse tighter as she watched Lily glide through her own home, like a queen surveying her kingdom. The contrast was stark. While Emma worked double shifts at the diner and cleaned offices at night just to keep food on the table for her daughter Sarah, Lily's biggest concern seemed to be which designer dress to wear to the country club. The mansion felt like a museum. Everything was perfect. Everything was expensive. Everything whispered of old Southern money and traditions that Emma had never been part of, despite marrying into this family years ago. But Jack was gone now. Her beloved husband taken too soon by a heart attack at 35, and with his death, Emma's place in this family had become questionable. "Oh, Emma, darling." Lily's voice dripped with false sweetness as she approached. "I'm so glad you could make it to our little family gathering. Though I must say that dress is charming, very thrift store chic." The relatives gathered in the parlor turned their heads. Some smiled politely, others looked away in embarrassment. Emma felt heat rise to her cheeks, but she forced herself to stand straighter. "It's good to see you too, Lily," Emma replied, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Lily's smile widened, sensing weakness like a predator smells blood. "And how is little Sarah? Still struggling with her grades, I heard. It must be so difficult for children when they don't have proper guidance, a stable home environment. Two parents, you know." The words hit like physical blows. Emma's breath caught in her throat. Around them, conversations had quieted. Everyone was listening now. Everyone was watching this public execution disguised as family concern. "Sarah is doing just fine, thank you," Emma managed, but her voice sounded smaller than she intended. "Can you imagine standing there, feeling every eye in the room judging you, measuring your worth against someone else's wealth and status? Have you ever felt that crushing weight of belonging nowhere, even among people who are supposed to be your family?" Lily circled her like a vulture. "Of course she is, bless her heart. It's just that children need so much these days. Private schools, tutoring, cultural experiences, all those things that require substantial resources." She paused dramatically, her diamond bracelet catching the chandelier light, things that some of us are better positioned to provide than others. Emma's chest tightened. She knew where this was leading. She'd heard the whispers, caught the meaningful glances between family members. They were all waiting for her to fail, waiting for her to prove that she couldn't handle raising Jack's daughter alone. "What exactly are you trying to say, Lily?" Emma's voice found its strength again, though her heart was pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. Lily's expression shifted to one of exaggerated concern. "Oh, sweet Emma, I'm just worried about you both, about Sarah's future. Jack would have wanted what's best for her, don't you think? And sometimes, what's best isn't always what's convenient." The implication hung in the air like smoke. Emma felt dizzy, but she couldn't show weakness. Not here. Not in front of these people who had already written her off as an inconvenience, a poor relation who had outlived her usefulness. But what Emma didn't know was that an elderly man in the corner of the room was watching this exchange with growing disapproval. Grandpa Henry, patriarch of the family, was taking careful note of every word, every cruel smile, every moment of calculated cruelty. And he was beginning to understand exactly what kind of person he had been supporting all these years. That night, Emma drove home to her small apartment above the hardware store, her hand shaking on the steering wheel. The contrast between Lily's mansion and her modest two-room home felt even more stark than usual. The walls were thin, The refrigerator hummed too loudly. The neighbors upstairs played their television too loudly too late at night. But it was home. It was hers and Sarah's. And no one could take that away from them, could they? Sarah was already asleep when Emma crept into their shared bedroom. At 8 years old, her daughter had her father's gentle eyes and stubborn chin. She slept peacefully, unaware of the storm clouds gathering around their little family. Emma sat on the edge of the bed and brushed Sarah's dark hair away from her face. "I won't let them hurt you, baby," she whispered. "I promise." But promises are easier to make than to keep, especially when you're fighting against people with unlimited resources and no conscience about using them. The next morning brought the first real blow. Emma arrived at the Moonlight Diner for her early shift, only to find her manager waiting with a concerned expression. "Emma, honey, I need to talk to you." Betty had been managing the diner for 20 years. She'd seen everything, survived everything, and rarely looked scared. Today she looked scared. "What's wrong?" Emma tied her apron with trembling fingers. "I got a call yesterday from someone claiming to be a health inspector, asked a lot of questions about you specifically, about your reliability, your home situation." Betty's voice dropped to a whisper. "Emma, someone's trying to cause trouble for you. Someone with enough influence to make official-sounding calls." Emma's blood ran cold. "Did they say anything else?" "They mentioned concerns about single mothers, about stress affecting job performance, about whether you might be unstable." Betty reached out and squeezed Emma's hand. "Now, I told them where they could stick their concerns. But Emma, you need to be careful. Someone's got it out for you." Emma's mind immediately went to Lily. Beautiful, wealthy, vindictive Lily, who had made her intentions crystal clear the night before. But would she really go this far? The answer came that afternoon when Emma picked Sarah up from school. "Mommy, why did that fancy lady come to talk to my teacher today?" Sarah asked, swinging Emma's hand as they walked to their car. Emma's heart stopped. "What fancy lady, sweetheart?" "She had pretty jewelry and smelled like flowers. She told Mrs. Peterson she was family and she was worried about me. She asked if I seemed sad, or if I talked about being hungry or scared at home." Sarah looked up with innocent confusion. "Why would I be scared at home?" Emma knelt down to Sarah's eye level, fighting to keep her voice calm. "What did you tell her, baby?" "I told her we're happy, that you make the best pancakes and read me stories and that we dance in our pajamas." Sarah smiled. She didn't look like she believed me, though. She kept asking weird questions. Emma pulled her daughter close, rage and terror warring in her chest. Lily wasn't just going after her anymore. She was targeting Sarah. She was investigating, digging, looking for any crack in their armor that she could exploit. But what Lily didn't know was that her investigation would soon uncover something else entirely, something that would change everything. That evening, as Emma was helping Sarah with homework at their tiny kitchen table, the phone rang. The voice on the other end was unexpected but familiar. "Emma, this is Mark, Lily's fiancé." He sounded nervous, uncertain. "Hi, Mark. Is everything okay?" Emma had always liked Mark. He seemed different from the rest of Lily's crowd, quieter, more thoughtful. But she wondered why he was calling her. I need to tell you something, about today, about what Lily did." There was a long pause. "I can't be part of this anymore. What she's doing to you, what she's planning. It's not right." Emma's grip tightened on the phone. "What is she planning?" "She's building a case, documentation. She wants to prove you're an unfit mother so she can petition for custody of Sarah. She thinks if she can get guardianship, she'll have a better claim to Jack's estate when it's finally settled." The room spun around Emma. She gripped the table to steady herself. "She can't do that. Sarah is my daughter. Emma, she has lawyers, good ones, and she's been documenting everything. Your work schedule, your living situation, Sarah's school performance. She even had someone follow you last week to photograph your apartment building." Mark's voice was heavy with guilt. "I should have told you sooner. I should have stopped her. Why didn't you? Emma wanted to scream, but she knew the answer. Money, status, the comfort of being on the winning side. It was easier to stay silent than to stand up to someone like Lily. Instead, she asked, "What else do you know?" "There's going to be a formal reading of Jack's will next month. Grandpa Henry has been putting it off because of some legal complications, but the lawyers are pushing for resolution. Lily's convinced she's going to inherit everything, the house, the business interests, even the trust fund that was supposed to be for Sarah." Emma closed her eyes. Jack had always promised that Sarah would be provided for, that there was money set aside for her education, her future. But if Lily got custody... "Mark, is there anything in Jack's will that could help me? Anything that specifies custody arrangements or Sarah's inheritance? I don't know the details, but Emma..." He paused, seeming to wrestle with something. "I think you should talk to Grandpa Henry. Soon, before Lily gets to him." The line went dead, leaving Emma staring at the phone in her hand. Around her, the small apartment felt even smaller. The walls seemed to be closing in, but something Mark had said stuck with her. Legal complications. Why would there be legal complications with Jack's will? He'd been meticulous about paperwork, always organized. What could be complicating things? Unless there was something in that will that no one knew about. Something Jack had kept secret. Over the next few days, Emma found herself studying every memory of her late husband, looking for clues. Jack had been different in the months before his death. More secretive, more protective of Sarah. She'd chalked it up to work stress, but now she wondered if he'd seen this coming, if he'd known what Lily was capable of and had taken steps to protect his daughter. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Chen, the elderly woman who owned the hardware store below Emma's apartment, knocked on her door one evening with a dusty cardboard box. "I found this in the storage room," she said in her careful English. "Has your husband's name on it. He asked me to keep it safe, gave me $50, said someone would come looking for it someday." Emma's hands shook as she took the box. Jack's handwriting was unmistakable on the label. "For Emma and Sarah, in case something happens to me." Inside, wrapped in tissue paper like precious treasures, were documents. Bank statements showing a separate account that Lily knew nothing about. Insurance papers. And at the bottom, a letter in Jack's careful script. "My darling Emma," it began. "If you're reading this, then something has happened to me and I'm not there to protect you and Sarah from my family. I've seen how they look at you. I've heard the comments. I know what they think of our marriage, of you, of our daughter." Emma's vision blurred with tears, but she kept reading. "I've made provisions. There are things in my will that I haven't told anyone about, not even the family lawyers who think they know everything. I've been working with an independent attorney for months, making sure that no matter what happens, you and Sarah are protected." The letter went on to detail hidden assets, secret provisions, and most importantly, a clause that Emma had never known existed, a clause that changed everything. But before Emma could fully process what she was reading, her phone rang. It was the hospital. Grandpa Henry had suffered a stroke. Have you ever felt like everything was falling apart at once? Like the universe was conspiring against you just when you needed strength most? That's where Emma found herself as she rushed to the hospital, clutching Jack's letter in her trembling hands. The intensive care unit was a maze of beeping machines and worried faces. The family had gathered, creating their usual hierarchy of concern. Lily stood near the nurse's station, giving orders like she owned the place. Mark lingered uncomfortably near the windows. Various cousins and relatives huddled in small groups, whispering about what this might mean for the family business, the estate, the future. Emma felt like an intruder. Again. "Oh, look who decided to show up!" Lily's voice cut through the medical equipment noise. "I suppose you heard about the inheritance implications of Henry's condition." Several family members turned to stare. Emma felt her cheeks burn, but she held Jack's letter tighter and stood her ground. I came because Henry is family, because he loved Jack, and Jack loved him. Her voice was steady, stronger than she felt. Lily laughed, a cold sound that echoed off the sterile walls. Family? Emma, sweetie, you're Jack's widow, past tense. Your connection to this family died with him. That's enough. The voice came from an unexpected source. Mark stepped forward, his face flushed with embarrassment and anger. Henry is fighting for his life in there, and you're using it as an opportunity to attack Emma? What kind of person does that? The hallway fell silent. Lily's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. She wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by her fiancé. Mark, you don't understand the complexities. I understand perfectly. Mark's voice grew louder. I understand that you've been harassing Emma and Sarah. I understand that you've been building some sick case to take custody of an 8-year-old girl. I understand that you've been lying to me about your intentions. Emma stared at him in shock. This was not the quiet, compliant Mark she'd known for years. This was someone finding his backbone at exactly the right moment. You told me you were concerned about Sarah's welfare, Mark continued. But you're not concerned about her at all. You're concerned about money, about control, about making sure Emma knows her place. Lily's face went white, then red with rage. How dare you? How dare I what? Tell the truth? Stand up for someone who's been nothing but kind to everyone in this family despite being treated like garbage? Mark turned to look at Emma, and for a moment his expression softened. I'm sorry, Emma. I should have said something sooner. Before anyone could respond, a doctor appeared in the hallway. Family of Henry Morrison? They all turned as one, the drama forgotten in the face of medical reality. Mr. Morrison is stable, but the stroke was significant. He's conscious now and asking for... The doctor consulted his clipboard. He's asking for Emma specifically. Lily's face went through a series of expressions: shock, rage, disbelief. That's impossible. I'm his primary contact. I handle all his affairs. The doctor looked uncomfortable but firm. Ma'am, the patient is lucid and competent to make his own decisions about visitors. He specifically requested to see Emma first. Alone. Emma felt every eye in the hallway boring into her. Part of her wanted to run, to avoid this confrontation, to let Lily have her moment of control. But she thought about Sarah, about Jack's letter, about all the time she'd been made to feel small and worthless. Not today. She followed the doctor down the hall, leaving behind a crowd of stunned relatives and one very angry sister-in-law. Grandpa Henry looked smaller in the hospital bed, frailer than Emma had ever seen him, but his eyes were sharp and clear when they met hers. Emma, child, come here. His voice was weak but determined. She pulled a chair close to his bedside. How are you feeling, Henry? Like an old fool who's been blind for too long. He reached for her hand with trembling fingers. I saw what happened at dinner last week. I heard what Lily said to you, and I've been doing some thinking about this family, about what Jack would want, about what's right. Emma squeezed his hand gently. You don't need to worry about any of that right now. You need to focus on getting better. Henry shook his head slightly. Emma, I'm 87 years old. I've lived through the Depression, 2 wars, and more family drama than any man should have to endure. I know when my time is getting short, and I know when things need to be set right. He paused, gathering strength. Jack's will. It's not what everyone thinks it is. We need to have that reading soon, before Lily does any more damage to you and that sweet girl. Emma's heart began to race. Henry, what do you know about Jack's will? The old man's eyes twinkled with something that might have been mischief. I know that my grandson was smarter than any of us gave him credit for. And I know that he made sure his girls would be protected, no matter what his family tried to do. Before Emma could ask more questions, Henry's eyes grew heavy. Get Judge Parker. Tell him Henry Morrison said it's time. He'll know what that means. Within minutes, Henry had fallen back into a medicated sleep, leaving Emma with more questions than answers, but also with something she hadn't felt in months: hope. As she walked back toward the waiting area, Emma could hear Lily's voice rising in indignation. "This is completely inappropriate. I should be handling all decisions regarding family matters. I've been managing Henry's affairs for years." Emma paused at the corner, listening. She needed to know what she was walking back into. "Lily, maybe it's time to step back and let others help." This was Mark again, his voice calmer now but still firm. "Henry is competent to make his own decisions about visitors and medical care. You don't understand the pressure he's under, the medications. Emma is clearly taking advantage of an old man's confusion to manipulate the situation for her own benefit." Emma stepped around the corner. "The only person I've seen trying to manipulate anyone is you, Lily." The waiting room fell silent again. Emma could feel her heart pounding, but she also felt something else. The strength that comes from having nothing left to lose. "For months you've been undermining me, attacking my character, going after my job, following me around like some kind of stalker. You've interrogated my daughter at school and made her feel like there's something wrong with our family." Emma's voice grew stronger with each word. "You've treated me like an inconvenience that you can just wish away." Lily's face was a mask of fury. "You have no right." "I have every right." Emma pulled Jack's letter from her purse. "I'm Jack's widow. I'm Sarah's mother, and I'm done letting you make me feel like I don't belong in my own daughter's family." She held up the letter. "Jack knew what kind of person you are, Lily. He knew what you'd try to do after he was gone, and he made sure that Sarah and I would be protected." Lily's eyes fixed on the letter like it was a snake. "What is that?" "Insurance," Emma said simply. "And a reminder that Jack loved his daughter enough to make sure she'd be safe from people like you." The confrontation might have escalated further, but at that moment, Dr. Patterson appeared with an update on Henry's condition. The immediate crisis of the stroke took over, pushing the family drama into the background. But the battle lines had been drawn. Emma had found her voice and her strength. Lily had been publicly challenged and embarrassed. Mark had chosen a side. And somewhere in the legal system, wheels were beginning to turn that would soon reveal just how well Jack had protected his family. Over the next week, Henry's condition stabilized, but the family dynamics had shifted permanently. Emma found herself with unexpected allies. Mark began calling her regularly, not just to apologize for his previous silence, but to share information about Lily's plans and machinations. "She's hired a private investigator," he told Emma during one late-night phone call. "She's trying to find anything she can use against you in court." Emma wasn't surprised. "What kind of things?" "Everything. Your work history, your finances, your social life. She even tried to get information about Jack's mental state before he died, to see if she could challenge the will on grounds of diminished capacity." Emma felt a chill. Can she do that? Not easily. "But Emma, you need to be prepared for her to fight dirty. She's convinced that if she can get custody of Sarah, she can control Jack's entire estate. She's not going to give up without a war." What Mark didn't tell Emma was that his own relationship with Lily was disintegrating rapidly. The woman he thought he'd fallen in love with was revealing herself to be someone he didn't recognize, someone whose hunger for control and money seemed to consume everything else about her. The revelation came during what would be their final dinner together. Lily was complaining, as had become her habit, about Emma's continued presence in the family. "I mean, what does she really bring to the table?" Lily was saying, gesturing with her wine glass. "She's working class, she has no education, no breeding, no understanding of how to manage real wealth. Jack clearly wasn't thinking straight when he married her." Mark set down his fork. "Do you hear yourself when you talk about Emma?" Lily looked genuinely surprised. "What do you mean? You talk about her like she's not a human being, like she's some kind of problem to be solved rather than a woman who's grieving her husband and trying to raise their child." Lily's expression hardened. "She's an obstacle, Mark. She's standing in the way of what this family needs." "What this family needs? or what you want? The question hung in the air between them. Lily's mask finally slipped completely. Fine. Yes, what I want. I want the life I was promised when I agreed to marry into this family. I want the security, the status, the resources that come with being part of the Morrison legacy. Is that so wrong? Mark stared at her. You agreed to marry into this family. Lily, I thought you were marrying me because you loved me. Lily looked genuinely confused by the question. Of course I love you. But Mark, love doesn't pay for the kind of life we want. Love doesn't maintain the house or the club memberships or the social position that matters in this community. So, if I lost everything tomorrow, if I was just a regular guy working a regular job, you wouldn't want to marry me anymore? Lily's silence was answer enough. Mark stood up from the table. I need some air. He walked out of the restaurant, out of the relationship, and ultimately out of Lily's plan to control the Morrison family fortune. But Lily wasn't done fighting. If anything, Mark's defection made her more determined to win. She couldn't control her fiancé, but she could still control the narrative around Emma and Sarah. The attack came from a direction Emma never expected. Sarah's teacher, Mrs. Peterson, called Emma at work with concerning news. Mrs. Morrison, I need to speak with you about Sarah. There have been some questions raised about her home situation. Emma's blood ran cold. What kind of questions? Child Services received an anonymous report suggesting that Sarah might be experiencing neglect, insufficient supervision, inadequate nutrition, possible emotional instability due to trauma from her father's death. Emma gripped the phone so hard her knuckles went white. That's not true. None of that is true. I know, Emma. I've been Sarah's teacher for 2 years. I've never seen any signs of neglect or instability. She's a bright, happy, well-adjusted child who clearly adores her mother. But I'm required to inform you that there will be an investigation. After Emma hung up, she sat in the diner's back office and cried. Not just tears of frustration or anger, but deep, wrenching sobs of fear and helplessness. How could she fight an enemy with unlimited resources and no conscience? How could she protect Sarah from people willing to use government agencies as weapons? But even in her darkest moment, Emma wasn't alone. Betty found her crying and immediately pulled up a chair. Honey, what's wrong? Through tears, Emma explained about the Child Services report, about Lily's campaign against her, about feeling like she was drowning in other people's power and influence. Betty listened without judgment, then said something that surprised Emma. Honey, I've lived in this town for 60 years. I've seen plenty of people like your sister-in-law come and go. They think money and status make them untouchable, but they always make the same mistake. What mistake? They underestimate regular folks. They think we're too stupid or too scared to fight back. But Emma, you've got something Lily doesn't have. What's that? People who actually care about you. Not your money or your status or what you can do for them. Just you. Betty smiled. And in a small town like this, that counts for more than you might think. Over the next few days, Emma discovered that Betty was right. The Child Services investigator who came to interview her was Mrs. Rodriguez, whose son Emma had helped with reading during slow periods at the diner. The caseworker was thorough but fair, and after seeing Sarah's home environment and interviewing her teachers and neighbors, she quickly determined that the report was malicious and unfounded. Whoever called this in gave very specific accusations, but they clearly had never actually observed your home or your interaction with Sarah, Mrs. Rodriguez told Emma. This has all the hallmarks of a false report filed for personal reasons rather than genuine concern for the child. Emma felt a moment of vindication, but she knew this was just the beginning. Lily had shown that she was willing to use any weapon available, and there would be more attacks coming. The next blow came through the legal system. Emma received official papers informing her that Lily was petitioning for temporary guardianship of Sarah, citing concerns about Emma's financial stability and emotional capacity to handle single motherhood while grieving. But this time, Emma was ready. She had Jack's letter, Henry's support, And most importantly, she had her own determination. She also had Judge Parker's phone number. Judge Parker was a small man with sharp eyes who had known the Morrison family for 40 years. He listened carefully as Emma explained the situation, showed him Jack's letter, and requested an expedited reading of the will. "Mrs. Morrison," he said finally, "your husband came to see me several times before his death. He was very concerned about his family's reaction to his marriage and his daughter's future. He asked me to make sure that certain provisions in his will were properly emphasized when the time came." Emma's heart began to race. "What kind of provisions?" Judge Parker smiled. "The kind that your sister-in-law is going to find very surprising." The formal will reading was scheduled for the following Friday. Emma spent the week in a state of nervous anticipation, trying to prepare herself for whatever was coming, while also protecting Sarah from the family drama swirling around them. Sarah, for her part, seemed to sense that something important was happening. She was more clingy than usual, asking questions about her father and whether they were going to have to move again. "Mommy, are we in trouble?" she asked one night as Emma was tucking her into bed. Emma smoothed her daughter's hair. "No, baby. We're not in trouble. Some grown-ups are having disagreements about boring legal stuff, but it doesn't change anything important." "What's important?" "That I love you more than anything in the whole world. That you're safe and happy. That we're a family, just you and me." Emma kissed Sarah's forehead. "Those things can't be changed by lawyers or courts or anybody else." Sarah nodded solemnly. "I love you too, Mommy, and I think Daddy would be proud of how brave you are." Emma's eyes filled with tears, out of the mouths of babes. Friday morning dawned gray and humid, typically southern weather that seemed to match the tension everyone was feeling. The will reading was scheduled for 10 a.m. at Judge Parker's office, a formal affair that would finally settle the question of Jack's estate. Emma arrived early, wearing her best dress and carrying a folder with Jack's letter and other documents. She was nervous, but determined. Whatever happened today, she would face it with dignity. Lily arrived like a queen holding court, surrounded by lawyers and wearing an outfit that probably cost more than Emma made in 3 months. She looked confident, even smug, as if the reading were a mere formality before her coronation as head of the Morrison family fortune. Mark was noticeably absent. Word had gotten around that he and Lily had broken up, though the details were still gossip fodder at the country club. Henry had been released from the hospital but was still weak. He arrived in a wheelchair, attended by a nurse, but his eyes were alert and focused. He nodded at Emma warmly and completely ignored Lily's attempts to fuss over him. Judge Parker entered the room carrying a thick folder and wearing an expression that gave nothing away. He was followed by a court reporter and another lawyer Emma didn't recognize. "We're here today for the formal reading of the last will and testament of John Henry Morrison, Jr., known as Jack Morrison," the judge began. "Mr. Morrison's will was executed 13 months before his death and has been properly verified and authenticated." Lily shifted forward in her seat like a cat preparing to pounce. The will contains several provisions that may come as a surprise to some family members. As Mr. Morrison made certain changes to his estate planning without consultation with the family lawyers who had handled previous Morrison wills. Emma felt her heart pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. "Let me read the relevant sections," Judge Parker continued. "First, regarding the family residence and primary real estate holdings. Does your heart race when you know something life-changing is about to happen? When you can feel the exact moment when everything shifts, when justice might finally be served?" Emma was living in that moment, suspended between fear and hope. Judge Parker adjusted his reading glasses and continued. "The family residence at 428 Magnolia Lane, along with all associated properties and real estate holdings, are to be held in trust for Sarah Elizabeth Morrison until she reaches the age of 25. Until that time, the properties will be managed by Sarah's legal guardian, with all maintenance costs and improvements to be paid from the estate." Lily's confident expression began to crack. This wasn't what she'd been expecting. Furthermore, the judge continued, Mr. Morrison stipulates that guardianship of his daughter Sarah shall remain with her mother, Emma Catherine Morrison, unless Emma is deemed legally unfit by a court of law based on clear and convincing evidence of abuse, neglect, or abandonment. Emma felt tears begin to build in her eyes, but they were tears of relief now, not fear. The liquid assets of the estate, including all bank accounts, investment portfolios, and business interests, are to be divided as follows. 25% to Henry Morrison Sr., in appreciation for his guidance and support. 70% to be placed in an educational trust for Sarah Elizabeth Morrison, managed by Emma Catherine Morrison as trustee. 5% to be donated to the town's children's library in memory of Jack Morrison. The silence in the room was deafening. Lily looked like she'd been slapped. Her lawyers were frantically taking notes and whispering among themselves, but Judge Parker wasn't finished. Mr. Morrison included a specific clause regarding any attempts to challenge these provisions or to remove Emma Morrison as Sarah's guardian for reasons other than those specified in the will. Any family member who initiates such proceedings will forfeit any claim to current or future Morrison family assets, including inheritance from other family members. Emma reached up to wipe away tears of overwhelming relief and gratitude. Jack had known. He had seen what kind of person Lily was, and he had made sure that she couldn't hurt his daughter or his wife. However, Judge Parker said, and Emma's heart skipped, there is one additional provision that Mr. Morrison specifically requested be read aloud in front of the assembled family. He pulled out a separate piece of paper. This is a letter that Jack Morrison wrote to be read at this proceeding. Judge Parker cleared his throat and began to read in Jack's voice from beyond the grave. If you're hearing this letter, it means I'm gone and my family is gathered to settle my affairs. I want everyone to understand why I made the decisions reflected in this will. Emma felt Jack's presence in the room, his love and protection reaching across death to shield his family. Emma became my wife because I loved her deeply and completely. She had nothing to do with money or family status or social position. She married a man who worked in construction and lived in a modest house because that's who I was when we met. She has never asked for anything from this family except common human decency. Lily's face had gone pale. Several family members were looking at her with growing understanding and disapproval. My daughter Sarah is the light of my life, but she is Emma's daughter too. Emma has been Sarah's mother since the day she was born. She feeds her, reads to her, comforts her nightmares, celebrates her achievements, and loves her unconditionally. No one has a greater right to raise this child. Judge Parker paused, letting the words sink in. If anyone in my family has made Emma feel unwelcome, if anyone has treated her as less than family, if anyone has tried to use my death as an opportunity to diminish her place in Sarah's life, then you have failed to honor my memory and my wishes. Emma was crying openly now, but she didn't care. These were Jack's words, Jack's love, Jack's protection wrapping around her like a warm blanket. The money doesn't matter. The property doesn't matter. What matters is that Sarah grows up knowing she is loved, knowing she belongs, and knowing that her mother sacrificed everything to give her a good life. Emma Morrison is the strongest, most loving woman I have ever known, and it is my greatest honor that she chose to build a life with me. The judge folded the letter. This concludes the reading of Jack Morrison's will. Mrs. Morrison, you'll need to meet with the estate attorneys to handle the transfer of assets and establish the trust accounts. Emma nodded, still crying too hard to speak. But Lily finally found her voice. This is outrageous. Jack was clearly not in his right mind when he wrote this will. No one leaves 70% of their estate to an 8-year-old child. This will be contested immediately. Judge Parker looked at her with poorly concealed distaste. Mrs. Morrison, you're certainly entitled to contest the will, but I should remind you of the forfeiture clause your brother-in-law included, specifically to discourage frivolous challenges. Lily's lawyer leaned over to whisper urgently in her ear. Her face went from pale to flushed as the implications became clear. You mean, if I contest the will and lose, I get nothing? Ever? That's exactly what it means, Judge Parker confirmed. Mr. Morrison was very specific about protecting his family from what he termed predatory litigation. Emma watched as Lily's entire worldview crashed down around her. For years, she had been planning for this moment, counting on inheriting enough money to maintain her lifestyle and social position. She had never considered that Jack might be smart enough and determined enough to outmaneuver her. As the family filed out of the judge's office, Emma found herself face to face with Lily in the hallway. For a moment, they stood looking at each other, two women who had been locked in battle over a child's future. You think you've won, Lily said quietly. But money doesn't solve everything, Emma. You're still going to be a single mother working 2 jobs and living in that tiny apartment. You're still going to struggle. Emma looked at her sister-in-law with something approaching pity. Lily, I've been struggling my whole life. The difference is now I don't have to struggle alone. And I don't have to struggle while worrying that someone is trying to take my daughter away from me. This isn't over, Lily warned. Yes, it is. Emma's voice was calm and final. It's been over since the day Jack died and you decided to treat his widow like an enemy instead of family. You had a choice, Lily. We all did. Jack just made sure that your choices would have consequences. Emma walked away, leaving Lily standing alone in the courthouse hallway, surrounded by lawyers and legal documents but utterly isolated by her own greed and cruelty. Outside, Henry was waiting by his car. Despite his recent stroke, he insisted on speaking with Emma. Child, he said, reaching for her hand, I owe you an apology. Emma knelt down beside his wheelchair. Henry, you don't owe me anything. Yes, I do. I've been living in this family for 87 years, and I thought I knew everyone in it. But I didn't really see what Lily was doing to you until that night at dinner. I didn't understand how she was making you feel like an outsider in your own family. Henry's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Jack was right to protect you and Sarah the way he did, and he was right to trust you with his daughter's future. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small velvet box. This was my wife's engagement ring, Jack's grandmother's ring. I want you to have it not because you need jewelry, but because you've earned your place in this family through love and sacrifice, because you're the daughter I never had. Emma opened the box to reveal a simple but elegant ring with a small diamond surrounded by tiny pearls. It was beautiful, but more than that, it represented acceptance, belonging, and love. Henry, I can't take this. It's too precious. It's not precious because it's expensive, Emma. It's precious because it represents love that lasts, commitment that endures, and family that stands by each other through everything. Henry smiled. Besides, Sarah should have her great-grandmother's ring someday, shouldn't she? Emma slipped the ring onto her right hand, where it fit perfectly. Thank you, Henry, for this, for standing up for us, for everything. Thank you, child, for showing this old man what real strength looks like. What grace under pressure actually means. Henry patted her hand. Now, you need to go pick up that granddaughter of mine and tell her that her daddy made sure she's going to be just fine. For the first time in months, Emma felt something she had almost forgotten. Peace. If you're finding this story as moving as I am, take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe. Your support helps us continue sharing these stories of resilience and hope. The months that followed the will reading brought changes that Emma could never have imagined. The most obvious change was financial. Suddenly, she didn't have to work 2 jobs just to keep food on the table. The estate provided enough income for Emma to quit her night cleaning job and focus on being present for Sarah. But the more profound changes were emotional and social. Word of the will reading had spread through their small southern town like kudzu in summer. The story of the wealthy sister-in-law who tried to steal a child's inheritance and got publicly humiliated in the process was too juicy for gossip circles to ignore. Public opinion, which had been lukewarm toward Emma while she was struggling, shifted dramatically once people understood what Lily had attempted to do. Southern society might have its flaws, but it has no tolerance for adults who target children or widows who try to steal from orphans. Emma found herself receiving invitations to social events she'd never been welcome at before. Church ladies who had barely nodded to her in the past were suddenly interested in her opinions on school board elections and community fundraisers. The irony wasn't lost on her. When she'd had nothing, people had ignored her. Now that she had money, they wanted to be her friend. But Emma was wise enough to distinguish between people who were interested in her newfound status and those who genuinely cared about her as a person. Mrs. Chen remained a daily part of their lives, still bringing homemade dumplings and practical advice. Betty at the diner treated Emma exactly the same as always, which Emma treasured. Mark began calling regularly, not as Lily's former fiancé, but as someone who had discovered his own conscience and wanted to build a genuine friendship. Sarah, for her part, adapted to their improved circumstances with the resilience of childhood. She was thrilled to have her own bedroom in their new house, a modest but comfortable place that Emma rented on the other side of town. She loved that she could have friends over without worrying about disturbing neighbors through thin walls. But perhaps most importantly, Sarah loved having her mother's full attention in the evenings, instead of watching Emma fall asleep over homework and accounting ledgers. "Mommy," Sarah said one night as Emma was reading her a bedtime story, "are you happier now?" Emma considered the question. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "Before, you always looked worried, like you were thinking about scary things. Now you smile more." Emma kissed the top of Sarah's head. "I am happier, baby. But not because of the money or the house. I'm happier because I'm not scared anymore." "What were you scared of?" "I was scared that someone might try to take you away from me, that I wasn't good enough to take care of you by myself." Emma smoothed Sarah's blankets. "But your daddy made sure that could never happen. He made sure we'd always be together." Sarah nodded solemnly. "I'm glad Daddy was smart." "Me too, sweetheart. Me too." As autumn turned to winter, Emma settled into a routine that felt sustainable for the first time since Jack's death. She volunteered at Sarah's school, joined the library board, and even started taking evening classes at the community college, something she'd always dreamed of but never had time for. She also began to understand the real scope of what Jack had left them. It wasn't just money, it was security, opportunity, and choices. Sarah could attend the best schools, pursue any interest she developed, go to college anywhere she wanted. Emma could finish her own education, maybe even start a small business someday. But with opportunity came responsibility. Emma was now managing a substantial trust fund, making decisions about investments and expenditures that would affect Sarah's entire future. It was intimidating at first, but Emma approached it the same way she approached everything else, with careful research, practical common sense, and an absolute determination to do right by her daughter. She also made a decision that surprised many people in town. Instead of moving into the grand Morrison family mansion that was now technically Sarah's property, Emma chose to rent it out and continue living in their modest rental house. "Why would you want to keep living in that little place when you could live in the mansion?" asked Mrs. Patterson at a PTA meeting. Emma had thought carefully about this decision. "Because Sarah and I need to build our own life, our own identity. That mansion represents the Morrison family history, which is important, but it's not our history. We need to create our own memories, our own traditions." She paused, thinking about how to explain it. "Besides, a house doesn't make a home. Love makes a home." What Emma didn't say was that living in the Morrison mansion would have felt like playing dress-up in someone else's life. She wanted to earn her place in the community through her own actions and choices, not by inheriting someone else's status symbols. This decision, more than anything else, seemed to convince people that Emma's character hadn't been changed by her new financial situation. She was still the same person who worked hard, loved her daughter fiercely, and treated everyone with kindness regardless of their station in life. The real test of Emma's changed circumstances came at Christmas time, when the Morrison family traditionally gathered for their annual holiday celebration. With Henry still recovering from his stroke and Lily essentially estranged from the family after the will-reading fiasco, there was some question about whether the celebration would happen at all. Emma made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. She offered to host the celebration. "You want to invite the whole family to your house?" Sarah asked, eyes wide with excitement. "Even the scary cousin who always complains about everything?" Emma laughed. "Yes, even Cousin Margaret." "It's Christmas, sweetheart. Family is important, even when family is complicated." The decision to host wasn't entirely altruistic. Emma was beginning to understand that she needed to establish herself not just as Jack's widow or Sarah's mother, but as a full member of the Morrison family in her own right, and that meant taking on some of the responsibilities of family leadership. She spent weeks planning the celebration, determined to honor traditions while also putting her own stamp on the event. Instead of the formal, catered affair that Lily typically organized, Emma planned a more casual, family-style gathering. She cooked most of the food herself with help from Mrs. Chen and Betty. She decorated the house with handmade ornaments that Sarah created. She planned activities that would include everyone, from Henry in his wheelchair to the youngest cousins. The evening of the party, Emma stood in her kitchen, wearing a simple red dress and her grandmother-in-law's ring, and realized that she was no longer the frightened, uncertain woman who had been humiliated at Lily's dinner table 6 months earlier. She had found her strength. She had found her voice. She had found her place. The guests began arriving at 6 o'clock, and Emma was struck by how different the dynamic felt from previous family gatherings. Without Lily's dominating presence, conversations were more natural, more inclusive. People seemed more relaxed, more genuinely happy to be together. Mark arrived with a poinsettia plant and a shy smile. "I know it's probably weird for me to be here, given everything that happened with Lily, but Henry specifically asked me to come." Emma accepted the plant warmly. "Mark, you stood up for Sarah and me when it mattered. That makes you family as far as I'm concerned." Henry arrived in his wheelchair, looking stronger than he had in months. He brought with him a surprise that no one had expected: Lily. The room fell silent when she walked in. Lily looked different than she had at the will reading, smaller somehow, less artificially polished. She was dressed simply, and she looked genuinely nervous. Emma felt every eye in the room turn to her, waiting to see how she would handle this moment. She had every right to ask Lily to leave. After everything Lily had put her through, no one would have blamed her for refusing to welcome her sister-in-law into her home. Instead, Emma walked directly to Lily and extended her hand. "Hello, Lily. I'm glad you could make it." Lily looked stunned. She had clearly expected anger, rejection, maybe even a public confrontation. She had not expected grace. "Emma, I wasn't sure you would want me here." "It's Christmas," Emma said simply, "and we're family, complicated as that might be." "Sarah, come say hello to your Aunt Lily." Sarah bounded over with the enthusiastic friendliness of childhood. She had never understood the adult conflicts swirling around her, and she was genuinely happy to see another family member. "Aunt Lily, Mommy made sugar cookies shaped like stars. Do you want to help me decorate them?" Lily's composure finally cracked. Tears began to flow down her cheeks as she knelt to hug Sarah. "I would love to help you decorate cookies, sweetheart." As the evening progressed, Emma watched Lily carefully. The other woman seemed genuinely remorseful, helping in the kitchen without being asked, engaging with family members she had previously ignored, playing games with the children instead of holding court with the adults. During a quiet moment in the kitchen, Lily approached Emma. "I need to apologize," she said quietly, "not just for the legal stuff, but for everything. For the way I treated you, for the things I said, for trying to make you feel like you didn't belong." Emma continued washing dishes, letting Lily talk. "I was so focused on what I thought I deserved, what I thought was owed to me. that I forgot what really matters. I almost destroyed a family, including my own relationship with Sarah, because I was jealous and greedy and cruel. Emma turned to look at her. Why are you telling me this now? Lily wiped her eyes. Because I lost Mark. Because I realized that I had become the kind of person that I wouldn't want to be friends with. Because I watched you tonight. The way you welcomed me into your home after everything I did. And I realized what real class actually looks like. She paused, struggling with the words. Emma, you didn't grow up with money or social connections or any of the advantages I had. But you have something I never learned. You know how to be a good person. How to be kind even when people don't deserve it. How to put family first even when family has hurt you. Emma felt tears building in her own eyes now. This was not at all what she had expected from the evening. Lily, I'm not perfect. I've made plenty of mistakes and I've had plenty of moments where I wanted to respond to your attacks with attacks of my own. But you didn't, Lily said. Even when you had every right to, you didn't. You rose above it and you took the high road, and you protected Sarah from all the adult drama. Lily's voice cracked. I want to learn how to do that. I want to be better than I was. Emma set down her dish towel and turned to face Lily fully. It starts with remembering that other people's feelings matter as much as your own. That being wealthy or well-connected doesn't make you more valuable than anyone else. That family means supporting each other, not competing with each other. Lily nodded. Can you ever forgive me? Can we try to be family for real this time? Emma considered the question. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It didn't mean pretending the past hadn't happened. But it did mean choosing to move forward instead of staying stuck in old hurts. I think we can try, Emma said finally. But Lily, if you ever try to hurt Sarah or me again, if you ever go back to the person you were 6 months ago, this conversation will be the last time we speak as family. I'm willing to give you a second chance, but there won't be a third one. Lily nodded firmly. I understand, and Emma, thank you for giving me the chance to be better. The rest of the evening passed in a warm blur of family conversation and childhood laughter. Sarah fell asleep on the couch next to Henry, who regaled her with stories of Christmases past. The adults lingered over coffee and pie, sharing memories of Jack and making plans for the new year. As the guests prepared to leave, Henry pulled Emma aside. You did something remarkable tonight, child, he said. You showed everyone in this room what leadership actually looks like. Not the kind of leadership that comes from having power over people, but the kind that comes from bringing out the best in them. Emma hugged him carefully. I just did what felt right. That's exactly what makes it remarkable. Henry smiled. Jack would be so proud of the woman you've become. After everyone had gone home and Sarah was tucked into bed, Emma sat in her quiet living room, surrounded by the pleasant debris of a successful party. The house smelled like pine trees and cinnamon. Torn wrapping paper littered the floor. Dirty dishes waited in the kitchen. And for the first time since Jack's death, Emma felt truly at peace. She wasn't the same person who had stood trembling in Lily's mansion, feeling small and unwelcome and afraid. She wasn't the same woman who had cried herself to sleep, worrying about whether she was good enough, strong enough, worthy enough to raise her daughter alone. She had discovered something that no inheritance could have given her. Her own strength, her own worth, her own capacity for leadership and grace. The money helped, certainly. The financial security meant that she could make choices based on what was right rather than what was necessary for survival. But the money hadn't changed who she was at her core. It had simply given her the space to become who she was meant to be. As Emma prepared for bed, she noticed that it was snowing outside. Unusual for their southern town, but magical nonetheless. The snow covered everything in a soft blanket of white, making the world outside her window look clean and new and full of possibilities. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new decisions, new opportunities to prove herself worthy of the trust that Jack had placed in her. There would be trust funds to manage, educational decisions to make for Sarah, family relationships to navigate. But tonight, Emma Morrison, widow, mother, and reluctant inheritor of a legacy she never expected, felt ready for whatever came next. 6 months later, as spring arrived in their small town, Emma found herself reflecting on how much had changed since that terrible night at Lily's dinner party. The transformation hadn't been magical or instantaneous. It had been a gradual process of finding her voice, standing up for herself and Sarah, and learning to accept both the responsibilities and the opportunities that came with their new situation. Sarah was thriving in her new school, making friends and excelling in her studies. She had started taking piano lessons and had joined the school's drama club. Most importantly, she seemed secure and happy, confident in her mother's love and no longer worried about their future. Emma had completed her first semester of college classes and was considering pursuing a degree in business or education. She had also started a small scholarship fund for single mothers in the community who wanted to continue their education, a way of using her resources to help other women facing the same struggles she had once faced. Lily, true to her word, had made genuine efforts to repair their relationship. She had started volunteering at the children's library, had taken a part-time job at a local nonprofit, and had made several sincere attempts to connect with Sarah as an aunt, rather than as someone who saw the child as a means to an end. The transformation wasn't complete. There were still moments when Lily's old entitlement surfaced, but the effort was real and consistent. More importantly, Emma had learned to set boundaries and maintain them, ensuring that Lily's presence in their lives remained positive and supportive. Mark had become a genuine friend, someone Emma could talk to about the challenges of managing an estate and the complexities of family relationships. Their friendship was built on mutual respect and shared experience, and while there had been moments when it seemed like it might develop into something more, both of them recognized that they needed to heal from their past relationships before considering new ones. Henry had become the grandfather Sarah had never really known, spending hours reading with her, teaching her to play chess, and sharing stories of her father's childhood. His recovery from the stroke had been slow but steady, and having Emma and Sarah in his life seemed to give him renewed purpose and energy. As Emma walked through the town square on this particular spring morning, stopping to chat with neighbors and friends, she realized that she had finally found what she'd been searching for without knowing it. Not just financial security, but a sense of belonging, of being valued for who she was rather than what she lacked. The journey had been painful at times. There had been moments when she'd wanted to give up, to accept Lily's assessment of her worth, to take the easier path of letting someone else make the big decisions about Sarah's future. But she had persevered, supported by the love of her daughter, the wisdom of friends like Mrs. Chen and Betty, and most importantly, by the strength she had discovered within herself. Have you walked this path? Have you found yourself in a place where people questioned your worth based on your bank account, your job title, or your social connections? Have you ever had to fight for your right to be respected as a human being, to protect your children, to claim your place in your own family? Emma's story is not unique. Around the world, every day, women and men find themselves facing the same challenges she faced. The challenge of being seen as less than because they don't fit someone else's definition of success or worth. But Emma's story is also proof that we are more resilient, more capable, and more worthy than our circumstances might suggest. That love and integrity and determination are more powerful than money and status and social connections. That sometimes the people who seem to have all the advantages are the ones who are truly poor, poor in spirit, poor in character, poor in the things that actually matter in the end. As Emma returned home that afternoon to find Sarah practicing piano and Henry reading in the garden, she felt grateful not just for what they had gained, but for what they had learned about themselves and each other through the struggle. The house was filled with the sound of slightly off-key piano music and the smell of cookies baking in the oven. Outside, the magnolia trees were blooming, filling the air with their sweet perfume. It was a simple scene of domestic contentment, but to Emma, it represented everything she had fought for and everything she had won. Not money or property or social status, but something far more valuable: the right to define her own worth, to raise her daughter with love and dignity, to be treated as an equal member of her own family. That evening, as she and Sarah sat on the front porch watching the sunset, Sarah asked a question that made Emma's heart swell with pride. "Mommy, when I grow up, I want to be like you." Emma smiled and pulled her daughter closer. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "I want to be brave like you. And kind like you. And I want to make sure that if someone is being mean to people who don't have as much money, I'll stand up for them the way you stood up for us." Emma felt tears of joy and gratitude fill her eyes. This was the real inheritance she was leaving her daughter. Not money in a trust fund, but values that would guide her through life. Not property or investments, but the knowledge that she was worthy of love and respect, and the responsibility to treat others with the same dignity she hoped to receive. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Emma thought about Jack and the legacy he had truly left them. Not just financial security, but proof that love endures beyond death. That it's possible to protect your family even when you're no longer there to do it in person. Jack had seen what kind of person Lily was, and he had made sure that her petty cruelties and greedy manipulations could never touch the people he loved most. He had given Emma not just money, but the tools she needed to stand up for herself and Sarah, to claim their rightful place in the family and the community. But most importantly, he had believed in her, believed that she had the strength and wisdom to handle whatever challenges came their way, to raise their daughter with love and integrity, to honor his memory not through grief, but through living a life worthy of the love they had shared. As Emma tucked Sarah into bed that night, she realized that her own story was far from over. There would be new challenges ahead, new decisions to make, new relationships to navigate. Sarah would grow up and face her own struggles, make her own choices, build her own life. But Emma was no longer afraid of the future. She had learned that she was stronger than she had ever imagined, that love really could conquer cruelty, that standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult, always leads to something better. She had learned that her worth didn't depend on other people's opinion of her, that dignity couldn't be taken away by someone else's words or actions, that family was defined not by blood or money, but by love and mutual support. As she turned off the lights and prepared for sleep, Emma whispered a prayer of gratitude for Jack's love, for Sarah's joy, for friends who had stood by her, for family members who had learned to see her truly, and for her own strength that had carried her through the storm into calmer waters. Tomorrow would bring new possibilities, new opportunities to use her resources and her experience to help others facing similar struggles. The scholarship fund was just the beginning. Emma was beginning to envision a larger mission of supporting families in transition, helping single parents navigate the legal and financial systems that could seem so intimidating from the outside. But tonight, Emma Morrison slept peacefully, surrounded by the love she had fought so hard to protect, secure in the knowledge that she had earned every moment of happiness she had found. The shy, frightened woman who had once stood trembling in Lily's parlor was gone, replaced by someone who knew her own worth and wouldn't let anyone convince her otherwise ever again. And in the morning she would wake up ready to face whatever came next, knowing that she had everything she needed to handle it. Not because she had money in the bank, but because she had love in her heart, strength in her character, and the unshakable certainty that she deserved all the good things life had to offer. Have you ever lived through or known someone who went through something similar? Have you seen how money and social status can make people cruel, or how love and determination can overcome almost any obstacle? Have you watched someone discover their own strength in the face of others' cruelty? Emma's journey from humiliation to triumph, from fear to confidence, from feeling worthless to knowing her true value is one that resonates with so many of us. We've all faced moments when the world seemed stacked against us, when people with more power or money or connections tried to make us feel small. But Emma's story reminds us that our worth isn't determined by our bank account or our address or our job title. It's determined by how we treat others, how we love our families, how we stand up for what's right even when it's difficult. It reminds us that sometimes the people who seem to have everything are actually the poorest of all, because they've never learned the value of kindness, the importance of humility, the joy that comes from lifting others up instead of tearing them down. And it reminds us that love really is stronger than money, that integrity really does triumph over manipulation in the end, and that sometimes the greatest victory is simply refusing to let someone else's cruelty change who you are at your core. If this story has moved you, if it's reminded you of your own strength or inspired you to stand up for someone who's being treated unfairly, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue sharing these stories of resilience and hope, these reminders that we are all more powerful than we sometimes believe. And share this story with someone who needs to hear it, someone who's facing their own battles with people who mistake wealth for worth, someone who needs to be reminded that they deserve respect and dignity regardless of their circumstances, someone who needs to know that it's possible to stand up to bullies and win through grace rather than aggression. Because Emma's story is all of our stories in one way or another. We all have the potential to choose kindness over cruelty, love over power, integrity over convenience. We all have the ability to create the kind of family and community where people are valued for who they are, not what they have. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, we get to see justice served not through revenge or punishment, but through the simple power of truth revealing itself and love proving stronger than everything that tries to destroy it. Thank you for listening to Emma's story. Thank you for being part of a community that believes in the power of ordinary people to do extraordinary things when they're motivated by love and guided by truth. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, and we'll see you in the next story.